You know those weekends when you literally have nothing booked, no plans on the schedule? Well, that is this weekend for me, which is awesome because I just got home and realized I have 5 fermentation projects that I'm working on. All I have to do this weekend is just hang out, have a good time, and work on these projects. I've got kombucha I'm making from scratch. I just ordered a new starter, and I ordered some hops. I heard about a hopped kombucha that I want to try. It's kind of like the middle ground between beer and kombucha. That's gonna be crazy. Sauerkraut, I'm making a sauerkraut from scratch. I just went through this whole jar of sauerkraut, so I'm gonna fill that up, and that will last me a few months. I'm making Koji for the first time, so I'm inoculating Koji. Most of you probably have no idea what Koji is, but it's what you need to make first to make miso and a lot of other Japanese projects. So I'm making that. I'm making sourdough bread. You've seen a lot of that, and I make it all the time. That's happening right now. And a very special one, I am drinking my beer for the first time. I brewed beer recently, and it's been about 5 weeks since I started the process, and today is the first day I get to try it. So you guys will come behind the scenes on that taste test, so let's get this weekend started. And just remember, the cool thing about this weekend is you're gonna get a nice general overview of different fermentation projects to see which ones you guys wanna do. You're not gonna get the specific recipes, that's not what this video is about, but I do have a lot of recipes out there, specific ones. So I'll link those in the description, and you can click on those to really get the full on specific guide.
Wow, check that out. Here's my starter. This is the first thing I'm gonna do. Super active starter. I mixed that about 3 hours ago, and now that's ready to go. That's just flour and water with the live yeast. And this is just right here. We've got flour and water again, but there's no activator in there. There's no yeast in there. This is called the auto-lyse process, where you're just hydrating the actual flour. So you're just mixing it with water, you hydrate it, it brings out a lot of the flavor, activates the sugars, all this good stuff that I don't really understand. But we're gonna mix that in right now, and once it's mixed in, you just fold it in. That's when the fermentation starts happening. That's when the rising starts happening and all of the action commences. All right, so it's all incorporated in here, and I can continue to just stretch and fold it, and that's gonna be your development of the gluten here, because that's what we're trying to do now. The yeast is incorporated. We need to develop the gluten structure so it actually stands up and it puffs up all nice on us. I'm actually gonna take it out and do some slap and fold. So this is also another technique where you're just slapping the dough. It's a wet dough. Sourdoughs are wet. They're high hydration. That's the biggest difference between this and like a pizza dough. And then we're just gonna slap it, fold it for about 10 minutes, and we'll let it proof a little more, and then we'll stretch and fold it a few more times. Both proof, blah, blah, blah. We'll see that in a second. Pro tip, if your hands are sticking way too much, which will happen, just wet them in a little bit of water. Not too much, because you don't want to add too much water to the dough, and then they'll slide right off, no problem. Slappy and a foldy. You don't want to knead the dough like this, because the whole idea is we're developing air in this thing. And if you're kneading the dough, you're pushing out the air. So we're just stretching it and folding it. All right, so I stretched and folded it, and you see how it just sinks down like that? That's not what you want. We haven't developed the structure of this. You want it to really support itself like a nice loaf. So over time, we're gonna continue, like every 20 minutes, we're gonna do a few more stretch and folds, just like that. We're done slapping and folding. We're gonna stretch and fold it. We can even do it in the bowl. And you're gonna continue to develop the structure for the next 2 hours, and then we'll let it bulk ferment for like 5 hours, and we'll be done with that for a while. So remember how we just used this sourdough starter? Well, you gotta keep this baby alive. That's part of making sourdough bread. If you wanna make it, you gotta keep your starter alive, just like a living thing. So I just added some flour and a little bit of water. That's equal parts by weight, but it really doesn't matter because I'm going to show you exactly what you're looking for. There you go, just a thick pancake batter. You can make it a little thinner, a little thicker than that. That's gonna rise like crazy if it's active. And the cool thing is, every day I've just been using this and making pancakes with it. I'm adding nothing but the starter to a pan with some hot oil, and then you can sprinkle on some scallions, some sesame seeds, whatever you want. That is gonna be a delicious sour pancake you can have every day. Actually, my friend just told me about a naan you can make with your sourdough starter, so I do wanna try that. Although I do love fermented foods and the projects that come along with it, I'm not a crazy man, that's not all I eat. So this is the first snack of the day. Little side guy right here. We've got a coconut rice here, kind of like a coconut pudding. I used maple syrup to sweeten that up. Coconut milk, mango right there, some fried mung beans, a little bit of sesame seeds, and some coconut milk right on top. The other weekend I went to a class that was all about Koji, and it was taught by my friend Jeremy. I'll link his Instagram here. Make sure you follow this guy if you want a true expert's guide to Koji, to fermentation, to foraging. He is a mastermind. I'm a novice when it comes to this stuff. This guy is a freaking genius. He knows it all, but he taught us all about Koji in this class, and it was great because a lot of times when it comes to these fermentation projects, it's all about getting over that initial barrier, because they're very scary in the beginning because you have no idea what you're doing. And that was where I was at with Koji. I had always wanted to get into it, but I was a little nervous. So right now I am working on my first Koji project. I'm actually growing Koji, and most of you probably don't know what it is because it's a Japanese fermentation technique. It's a little different than fermentation. It's you're growing mold on rice. And once you have that moldy rice, then you can make things like miso, you can make sake, you can make soy sauce. So all of those traditional Japanese delicious fermented foods, they all come from Koji. And really the possibilities are endless once you make it. So I am inoculating this stuff for the first time. Who knows if it's gonna work, but I'm trying it out. He gave us sort of like the home version of how you can grow it. So I'll take you behind the scenes on how I'm doing it. So here you go. Here is the Koji that I am growing, and you missed the initial steps. I'm gonna take it out of here. First you have to steam rice. And it's always great to use in the beginning to use a polished rice, a white rice, because it's easier for the mold to actually break down the starch because it doesn't have to break through so much of that outside shell. And I have it in this plastic wrap because Koji is actually a tropical mold, so it likes a hot, humid environment. And what I'm doing is I'm wrapping it in plastic, and then I'm also putting it on a heat pad. So you can stick it in like a dehydrator. You're trying to get it up to, 90 to 95 degrees, the environment. So I have it on a heat pad, and it's doing a pretty good job. I'll show you guys that in a second. But this is it. Basically, you cook the rice and you add the spores. Koji is actually a spore that grows on the rice naturally in the wild, and thousands of years ago they realized if you harvest that, you can add it to stuff and you can use it to preserve things. So that's what we have here, and I'm just gonna mix this up, and you're gonna see over time, hopefully, this mold is gonna start to grow and it's gonna start to smell super yeasty, and it actually gets pretty sweet. Some people say it tastes like Fruity Pebbles, this rice. Some people say it tastes like oatmeal. For me, it tastes a little bit like rice pudding once it's really broken this stuff down and grown. But it's good to just mix it up every few hours to make sure it's all incorporated and even. So that's what I'm gonna do now. Here we go. Here is my heat pad. So this is my Koji setup. That's heating the bottom. Shot glass keeps the plastic wrap from touching the rice. And the plastic wrap keeps it nice and humid, so you'll see some water starting to build up. That's a good sign. And then I've got the thermometer over here keeping track of how warm the rice is and then how warm the environment is. So the environment, you want it like 90 to 95 degrees, and the rice you want, 95 to 105 degrees, somewhere in that range. Tropical environment in Brooklyn in March. All right, this one I'm pretty excited about. We've got a live unboxing right now. coming from Kombucha Brooklyn. Kombucha Brooklyn is a pretty big company when it comes to kombucha products. They're based out of, I think upstate this is being shipped out of, but I know they do workshops. Let's see what this, Michael. Happy Brewing, that's really nice. Okay. So, boom. Here you go. This is like what I was talking about before. These are the whole hops that I'm gonna try to use in my kombucha. Hops are what gives beer flavor. You know, so IPAs, that hoppy flavor, that's where it comes from. So I got a few packets of that. And then the mother load. Ooh, it's got some weight to it. Here we go. So I had a SCOBY going and I had a kombucha going for a while, but I actually had a batch that went bad and I looked back into, that's what happens with fermentation. Sometimes things go wrong. You look back into it and you realize you were doing something completely wrong. And what I was doing was I was keeping in some of the old SCOBYs. And if you're not using the new SCOBYs every time and getting rid of some of the old SCOBYs that form, then your kombucha will turn into vinegar. So my acidity was way too high and it turned into vinegar. So I just wanted to try this company, give them a try to see how their kombucha goes. A SCOBY with a starter for 1 gallon. So I will brew 1 gallon and then I'll try to make a hot kombucha. Look at this stuff.
Oh, dear Lord. The smell of fresh hops, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful flower. Actually, the first time I smelled it, I was like, this is similar to marijuana. And then of course I realized that, I didn't realize, I was told that it was from the same family, which makes a lot of sense. So hops preserves beer a little bit, but also adds insane flavor. And I'm really interested to see how this works with kombucha. I don't think you guys will get to see that because it takes about 10 days until I add this stuff. But I don't know, check back on Instagram, Brothers Green. I'm sure I'll show that. I'll give a taste test in the near future. When it comes to making kombucha, there's so many different techniques out there. So I'm actually just gonna follow along with their little recipe guide because they're the masters. I'm sure they've tested this a million times. They know it works. So I'm gonna follow this recipe card, and the main thing that's different on this one is that you steep the tea for 20 minutes, which is an extremely long amount of time to steep tea. I've done 10 minutes and that's pretty long. So 20 minutes is interesting. That is a long steep. So I'm gonna go with that and see what's happening. I've got my tea steeping, or I'm just boiling water over here. And then I will put in, I'm using black tea. You boil that, and it's basically a tea concentrate, so it's a small amount, because then you pour cold water over that, which cools the water so you can put the SCOBY right in. After reading through this recipe, which deals mostly in gallons, I realized my brew jug has no marks or measurements on it, so I'm gonna put my own on there. I just took a measuring cup, and 16 cups equals 1 gallon. So I poured first half gallon, then a gallon, then 1.5, and marked those off. So now I know, booyakasha.
Alright, so what I did was I added the tea to the sugar, mixed that up first so it dissolved in the warm tea water. Then I added cool water because you can't add the SCOBY to hot water or it will kill it. Brought that up to a temperature that was legit, under 90 degrees. Pouring in the starter liquid and the SCOBY. Alright, and now I have these trusty little markers here. So I'm just gonna bring up the water level just a tiny bit to get to the 1 gallon. Put a cheesecloth on that. Forget about it for 10 days because my temperature, well, we'll see. The temperature is still kind of low here. Kombucha really likes 75 to 85 degrees.
So yeah, I'll forget about it for 10 days. So check back on Instagram if you want to see the hops kombucha.
So I made a little pad see ew for dinner tonight. That is the Thai dish with the flat rice noodles, a little egg, eggplant. We've got some pea shoots and some trumpet mushrooms in there. That is delicious, no doubt about it, but that is not the main event for tonight. Tasty, but what's really special are these babies. I've been working on this for weeks now. This is my first home brewed beer right here, bottled up. So the initial fermentation process took about 3 weeks, and then the bottling process to carbonate took another 2 weeks. They're cold. They came right out of the old fridge, and they're ready for a taste test. So I'm really excited to taste these things. Here we go. Let's see what the carbonation's like on these. Oh, okay. Oh, it smells delicious. Wow. Looks like a beer to me. Look at that. That's perfect head right there. That's what they call that. The foam level. That looks awesome.
Here we go, the first taste test right here. This is a pale ale, almost like an IPA. So a good amount of hops in the beginning to give it some bitterness and flavor, and then a dry hopping process just for aroma and flavor. Wow, I can't get over the carbonation that came out so well. Taste. Ow, 5 weeks. Wow, the freshness right there. Oh my God. You know, it's funny because I've been tasting it along the way. I even tried it before it was totally carbonated. That coming fresh out of the carbonation, so cold, that is amazing. For a first time homebrew, I'll take that. I'm excited to do more, but this is freaking delicious. Now I've got 24 beers. Hopefully I'll be showing you guys how to do homebrew as well. I wanted to kind of get the process down first myself. I'm still learning a lot, of course. I mean, there's endless to learn, but soon enough, I'll be showing you guys how to brew your own beer. I've got one more mission before I go to bed, and that is forming the loaves into the shape they're gonna bake into, and then they proof overnight in these proofing baskets right here. And I put them in the fridge to proof, so it slows down the proofing. So it's a nice, long, slow proof and fermentation, which will hopefully create a really nice bread. And this is the hardest part about bread making, is this forming of the loaf. I've watched like thousands of Instagram videos. You can just watch it all day, just people forming the bread, but it's a lot of fun to do. It's just difficult to work with a wet dough like this. So I suggest if you guys are doing it at home, just practice, keep practicing. Definitely start with dough that isn't as wet and then work your way up to a wetter dough.
So I shaped the bread right here and I rolled them in sesame seeds, and that's going to be the top coating. So that will keep it non-stick on the bottom. And I'm just going to take some flour and just hit up the top and around the sides just to make sure, since it's a really wet dough, that it doesn't stick to these little proofing things. And I'll put them in a plastic bag, call it a night. One last thing. Remember that starter from before? Back and activated. Look at that. That is a really beautiful activation right there. Those bubbles are intense. So I'll feed that right now before bed. You want to feed it twice a day, so once in the morning, once at night. And you got yourself some sourdough.